Cheers.
I'm going to...
Yeah, you're going to finish that. Hang on,
This is the start of the podcast.
Well, I feel like it's not us hanging out until we neck a beer and immediately pour another.
Exactly. So last time we didn't hang out, but this time, unfortunately, there's no cat. So
It is a bit of a rip.
you're...
I fucking love Head, man.
You love... I can tell.
Have I told you how much I love
Just
Head?
love a huge amount of Head.
Oh, yeah.
It was a A+ start.
I'm going to leave this all in too.
If you're wondering what kind of beers we're drinking, they're not beers for people who care about beer. They're beers for people who don't mind cheap shit beer.
Yeah. Gee, this is fucked. What did I do?
It's a fucking travesty.
This reminds me of like the fucking Bella's beer pour.
Oh,
You remember some of those?
Yeah, I mean, it's like half foam because they haven't replaced the keg.
Yeah. Chin chin. So I've been waiting all day to ask you about this. Do you know what a strode is?
A strode.
Yeah, strode.
Is that a fencing term?
No. Well, it depends. If you're driving, it could be. So a strode.
You're going to knock over your beer. I'm giving me anxiety.
Okay, so a strode comes from, well, the definition comes from the etymology of the name. So we look at the first part, the str, the str, str comes from street, right? And then when you combine a street and then a row, right, you get the road. Mm-hmm. So when a street and a road combine, you end up with the last part of the name, which is chode. And all through Melbourne suburbs, we have stroads, which are way too wide. They don't go for long enough, and they try and combine both like a road, which is meant to be a thoroughfare of traffic, and a street where you turn off into things.
I promise this is a fencing podcast.
And they are the worst. They are why everyone in Melbourne is so bad at driving. Because everything's a strode.
I don't know what to do with this information.
I think you're doing just fine. Oh, I didn't push it.
I've been given decision paralysis.
But about fencing.
About fencing, because we're here to do a fencing podcast.
How sick was Wednesday?
Fuck, what did I do on Wednesday? Oh my God, we did the thing on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So, in this book, when you find the sword, he tells you to like lean, and actually, handy bookshelf. In this guy, this is the Vienna Anonymous, which is sort of is based on Fabris and Capo Ferro.
It's you haven't read it for a while, have you?
The most I've read it really is leafing through it various times because I can't read.
Yeah, it's it's a pretty good book because it's like it. Well, it just is based off Fabris and Capo Ferro and a mysterious third author.
Right.
But the way that we know that it's based off it is because he'll write a section and then in brackets we'll write CF or F.S and then a page number.
Right, but there's not a book that we know that he's referring to.
Well, so for that, CF, Capo Ferro, FS, Fabris Salvatore, other way around, SF. And then there is another person, LS.
Oh.
And we don't know who LS is.
Cool. That's a fun fencing secret. What I was getting at, what I was heading towards, is that there is a bit in here, I don't know where it is. And he says, if your opponent's in a low third guard, and we should be able to bring the image up on the screen here. when they're in this low third guard, you start, like the way to approach it is to start by being leant back and then you put your own point that low and then you lean in. And so you don't really move your feet at all. You just progress your body forward. Because Fabris approaches this guard in the proceedings, which, let me just fucking find the page. It's in the first rule.
The way that he tells you to come at that guard.
Yeah, so in the Tom
real
Manning
special
translation,
way.
that's page
Yeah, special way.
173.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's these guys here. So Fabris has his method here. The Vienna method is different.
No, it's actually the same.
Yeah, but it gives you the onset.
It gives you more details.
It gives me
fully fleshes
so
that
it gives
out.
me the details that I needed to start playing against that, because Rapier people hold their point low all the time, whether they know they're doing it or not.
Yeah.
Because sometimes their arm is tired, but we're still actually fencing.
Yeah.
Or maybe they think they're being cheeky. Whatever fucking reason, who cares? And so it just meant I immediately was just like, okay, cool, your point's low. And I would start leant back and I would lean in and progress that lean forward.
Yep. And the lean forward part was... Actually, it's kind of funny. A few weeks ago, do you remember when we were playing around with like following your strength?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I presented a low guard and then couldn't quite grok it.
Yeah, he's talking about like following the line of the line that your sword is already pointed in. Fabris says your sword is strongest in the line that it points.
Yeah. So you literally follow that line. You don't deviate. You create a straight line from basically your body out of the point of your sword and you follow that, whatever. Yeah. You couldn't quite grok it when we were trying to play around with it. And I thought, well, actually, I did mentally grok what was needing to happen, which is that when you've got that really point low guard, effectively what needs to happen is that your point sort of needs to be higher, and it always you kind of need to always maintain that relationship. So your point is going higher as you go further in.
Right.
But your hilt is going lower so that you're not freeing their sword.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the thing that I missed until what was happening on Wednesday when we were playing around with all of these really extended positions is that a couple of times you gave me that really low guard, and the way that you combat that, it's not that you're necessarily putting your sword low. It's not that you're bringing your hand really fucking low and doing against Capo Ferro's wisdom of having your sword next to your knee, because that makes your top half really vulnerable.
Yeah, sure.
And gets you hit because you move your sword away from your body, which is exactly the point of putting your point low.
Yeah.
And then you just get hit in the fucking head like a nonce.
Which also, public service announcement, hit your local nonce in the head.
Please do. The way that you get that is that you're using those leans that the Italian fencers want you to do, really quite extreme, and then you lean forward. And by leaning forward and low enough, you actually end up with, if your sword is dividing your body exactly sort of halfway and you're forward enough leant, that low guard is now completely covered by your sword.
Yeah.
Which is kind of whack, kind of wild. Does that make sense? You were playing around with it where it's like your rip microphone for a second, but you were like this, and then you go right forward and you're leaning like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we videoed that.
Oh, I think we did, actually.
So if we're good with the editing, we might check that out.
Yeah, we might actually be able to show that exactly working.
The problem I was having, and this is, I think, is a problem most Fabris practitioners have. is thinking that you're leant over
Yeah. Fucking hell.
and then actually holding yourself low but torso upright. And the funny thing is, 7 years ago, Raina told me, you think you're low, but you think you're bent over, but you're just low.
Really?
Yeah, upright. So mad. The thing is, like, I sort of knew I wasn't, at least like on Wednesday, I sort of knew I wasn't bent over, but I was like mentally doing the same stuff. And what kept happening was I kept being afraid of committing myself forward.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that actually the lean needs to happen before the weight transfer. And I was doing the lean and the weight transfer at the same time.
Yep. Yep.
And when you do the lean forward and the weight transfer forward at the same time, you're putting your targets all in that forward zone.
Yep.
You're eating up a huge amount of your opponent's sword, which is actually really bad because now it's really easy for them to molest your sword. So you could totally do a shortening, like, variation of sixth rules ideas, right?
Yep. Yep.
Sixth rule of the second
Fabris.
book proceeding, Fabris. You could totally do that. Or you can just get the lean to happen before you do the forward weight transfer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing was, like, I was playing from starting with really deep rear leans and then edging my front foot forward. Excuse me. Getting my front foot forward as far as possible and then transferring from a rear lean to a midpoint to a forward lean, or at least trying to get to a forward lean. And because I was doing that with the weight shift at the same time, I would end up in a danger zone, chest upright,
Yep.
and then be like, I don't want to go forward more, so I'd stop leaning.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, actually that would happen to me all the fucking time. And then I would lower my stance a little because I'm like, oh, well, I'll get forward. And actually what's happening is my butt is kind of shifting backwards, placing even more tension and weight on my feet, making them more stuck and me more upright. Any kind of like forward lean with my body counteracted by trying to pull it away with my...
It's such a fucking classic.
And I just end up and there's it's funny actually, there's the video of you and I fencing in Sydney.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of Bibs transitioning between actually sort of trying to be Lent and then things getting a little spicy and Bibs thinking that he's Lent, but it's because it's a bit stressful, it's a bit of danger, maybe I'm going to get hit, and I'm just fully upright. Yeah. And then, lo and behold, you can just, like, you snap in shots and they annihilate me. Yeah. Wednesday was really cool for me because I was like, all right, pun intended, I lent into what Capo Ferro was trying to ask me to do. And so from my perspective, I was really quite exaggerated with my leans.
Yeah.
When I watched the footage back, actually, a lot of the time, the leans aren't that exaggerated.
No, and you sort of think that you're fucking like chest horizontal.
Yeah, and
then you're kind of like
here.
A little bit of tilt.
Yeah. And like the backward lean as well. It's like I swear to God I was so far back.
The backward lean's the worst actually because you think that you're like way back here. But actually because your head is heavy.
Classic.
And is past your point of balance.
Yeah.
This feels like you're really leant back. And it actually feels as leant back as being here when you're actually standing. Mm-hmm. I can actually lean further back because I'm in a fucking chair. But like if you're doing that kind of posture while standing, that feels extreme. And I mean, you can see I'm not that extremely leant.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just because you're out of your like You're out of your base.
You're out of your base. Your head's out of your base, and you realize that your head weighs fucking 9 kilograms. And you're like, wow, fuck.
Speaking of which, get swords that flex under 9 kilograms for the love of God.
How much does your head actually weigh?
It's actually about sort of 8 to 10
Is
kilo.
it 8 to 10? Fucking hell.
Yeah. So long swords that flex at 18 kilos don't flex when they hit your head.
I love that. That's great. That's
Let's talk about this. This is some HEMA drama. There was an event in. We'll put it up on the screen. I can't fucking remember what it was.
this is the one that you were telling me about.
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
These dudes. So this event was run by the guy who runs Kvetten.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know. Where's Kvetten?
Kvetten was Russian. They're not Russian anymore.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. Cool.
That's cool. And they had so many injuries.
Oh. Just like recently?
So they ran an event.
Oh, just at the event.
Oh,
fuck. What? How?
Because the swords are stiff and because their idea of like fun longsword time is
Oh, Jesus.
martial. I'm going to tell you something about flexible swords. So this is for the martial larpers, right? If you're trying to do martial fencing, if your sword is so stiff that it shoves your opponent away from you when you hit them, it is not simulating a sharp sword. If your sword is flexible and deforms when you hit them, it is simulating the closure of bodies that would happen
If it was
fucking sharp. And even then, it's not as good. Fabra says you can slide through to the hilt. And you can't do that with even a really friendly... You can't do that with a fucking foil.
Yeah.
You can't do that with the friendliest rapiers I've held. But it's a little bit closer, and it means that your actions of opposition are more like what would happen were you to do them with a sharp. If you do them with a blunt... if you do them with a stiff blunt... that shoves the opponent, you're not actually getting the blade interactions that your historical source is recommending that you would have.
To continue this straw man and defend him, how many people out there are actually using stiff weapons because they think it's fucking martial larping, and how many are just using it because we don't fucking have good swords?
Okay, so there's a durability issue. That's a big factor, right? There's a durability issue with flexible swords.
Yeah.
So a stiffer sword for a club is sort of a surer purchase because
You're not going to have to replace it.
you won't have to replace it as quickly.
Yeah. And swords are fucking expensive.
They're
like,
way too fucking expensive.
just put in a massive Castile order, and what are we paying per blade? It's like,
It's like 300 Australian. No, it's like 320 Australian.
320 Australian. It's a lot
And
of
we're
fucking
just
money.
getting blades.
Just blade. Yeah. Not even the
That's 320
sword.
Australian per blade.
Yeah. And there's probably still a little stiffer than actually what we want.
Yeah, the Castile
Just
blade
like
is
a little-
not quite as flexible as I would like. I would really like sort of the average flex at about 4 kilos.
Yeah.
Brad White, who's an Australian smith who doesn't make swords anymore, if you've seen any of my videos, that's probably the rapier I'm using, is the one made by Brad White. And that particular sword flexes at 6 kilos, but he made one that was the same blade geometry but off 8 mil stock instead of 10 mil stock.
Right.
And he got that down to a 4 kilo flex.
That'd be good.
It's really, really
Did it
nice.
set? Who's got that in the
Chris
moment?
Godwin.
Oh, is that Godwin's sword? Fuck,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah, my sword is also Godwin's sword.
Yeah, but it's yours now.
Yeah, so Chris's one's really light as well. It's like his is about 1 kilo flat, maybe just over 1 kilo, whereas mine's kind of heavy. It's 1,200 grams.
Gotcha.
I think about 1 kilo is a very nice weight for the weapon to really feel like rapier. It doesn't feel like you're doing heavy epee. It feels like rapier.
Vienna would somewhat disagree. Vienna thinks that you should practice with the heaviest sword humanly possible.
It's just the one time that I think that he's wrong.
No, he thinks that you should do that so you can get mad gains.
Yeah, do weights training.
He's literally like, if you can do all of your actions with a heavy sword in the club, then when you finally get your light sword and you go to fucking fight someone, you just wreck them.
So he's saying when you're trying to win, use a light sword.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, he is. But he's like, get mad gains, bro. Use a heavy sword in training.
Or like go to the gym or go to your local climbing gym.
Yeah. So, fucking come on, Vienna. Where's your climbing gym?
Vienna, where's your fucking
17th century?
17th century bouldering gyms?
Yeah. Well, this point sort of comes to mind with gear and swords that flex and all that sort of stuff. We've got some good tech now.
Yeah.
Like, fucking tell me that a Greek Olympian wouldn't get the running shoes that we have today and the track that we have today. Yeah, they would be like, fuck yeah, give me those shoes.
Yeah.
I don't care about, like, I want to go fast, bro.
I want to win.
I want to win. The
Yeah.
fences of, like, the Italian fences are, if you can make reliable, light, flexible swords that just can be, they're cheap and they get made quickly.
If they're cheap enough, it doesn't really matter if they break.
Yeah.
The foil or the modern fencing community are really sort of at peace with the fact that their swords break.
Yep.
On Friday at foil, a dude was just checking that his foil wasn't getting, that the button wasn't getting stuck. And he snapped the tip off. Right? Clearly that sword was like well past its due date and something was going to kill it. He was just like waggling it and he waggled it against his foot.
Yeah, and it just fucking snapped.
It just snapped. He didn't even blink. He just walked to his kit bag, grabbed another foil, came over and fenced me. Right? And that only happens when blades are cheap enough.
Yeah, if it's, there's always an entry cost to your sport, but it can't be crippling.
No,
And
so that was
people at the moment with HEMA are saving up their dollars.
That's like a $60 foil blade, like 60 Australian.
Yeah.
Right?
Which for all you US fucks is cheap as.
It's like half. Right?
If your fucking rapier blade, okay, there's a bit more metal. So what, like 80 Australian?
Yeah, it's a bit more. Yeah. Shit, if it's 100,
yeah.
If it's 100 and you go through one a year compared to it's $800 fucking dollars, or Castile's $300.
Castile's $320. Yeah, and then shipping and then the time that it takes to get the sword as well.
Right.
I appreciate that our smiths are there handcrafting, but
where is my cheap Chinese mass production of a good rapier blade?
Give me a CNC machine,
I think there's some issues with the tempering.
Yeah.
So you want the heat treating has to be done.
Whatever foil is doing, whatever the Ollie guys are doing.
Why can't that happen to a rapier blade of the right geometry?
I guess it's scale, right? There's just not enough people doing it.
The thing is, if you get the design right, they can sit on a shelf for 6 years before you sell them. It doesn't really matter.
Possibly. I actually don't know. Look, I know nothing about engineering, so I'm just going to say yes. Drink to that.
Well, yeah, and I'm just talking about like if you're going the mass production route.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like steel fucking expires. It's not milk.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it does though.
Just
Is there a thing? Does steel expire? Okay, this is not a question for this
It
podcast.
just rusts.
Yeah. Well then, but like
So
if
just
you get
cover
enough
it in
rust
tool oil.
just fucking the yearly washing of oil. Yeah, wash them all.
Keep them in your wine cellar. It's dry.
Dry. Keep them just drowning in oil, nice and stored. Perfect. We should get mass-produced blades that are cheap.
Yeah.
To be based.
That's my thing. If someone's listening to the podcast and wants to just do that, like,
Do it.
Fucking do it.
Do it.
And consult us because I know exactly what the perfect rapier blade looks like.
Yeah. Okay. HEMA drama. Tournament. Everyone got injured.
Oh, yeah.
So, tell me more. How was this like on Discord that it was getting? Or it was
Yeah, so I was
Facebook
seeing the
groups?
drama on the big HEMA Discord.
Yeah. Yep. Were
And-
people mad about it? Is that what was going on?
I think the problem to me is that these guys have got really fucking stiff swords and they're happy competing with them,
Right.
right? And these are the same guys who absolutely shat on Siggy putting out the Siggy Light, which is...
Oh, really?
The Siggy Light's one of the best...
It's a great longsword.
It's a fucking brilliant longsword. The blades are replaceable.
Yeah.
You can just buy a new blade. This is
Yeah.
the thing. If you're painting your tangs, you're fucking the customer. Mm-hmm. Because now they need to buy all the furniture, and the furniture takes time, and you got to balance the whole sword. Let the customer balance the sword,
Yeah.
right? They bought your standard fucking furniture. The first time they bought a sword, let them replace just the blade.
Yeah.
And that has to be, you have to be able to screw, you have to have screw pommels.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got a screw pommel. It's very light. It's very flexible.
Good job. Move in the right direction.
And with longswords, I don't think you want to go too light. Like there is a point where it changes the game. So a mate of ours up in Queensland, Dan Arnold, he took the musketeer blade and he made some longswords with those.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
HFA does the musketeer blades, which is like a long epee blade.
yeah. And then it's like 3D printed handle. I think he just got some fabricated quillions pretty much for the...
They're actually also 3D printed. You can get metallic 3D prints.
Yeah,
it's really
sick.
weird. Yeah, so those, if you're running a longsword class, they're brilliant. If you're competing in longsword, that's not the way I want the longsword game to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They're too light, so they're just kind of too fast.
And yeah, right. So this is if you've been training with a rapier and then you grab an epee, which is much closer than foil, you know, which is
in weight. Yeah.
like what the fuck is this weapon? This is cracked at. And those longswords are very much like that.
Yeah, it's the epee longsword.
It's the epee longsword. They're great. The funny thing about them is that you can actually still do all of the mechanics.
If you're doing drills, like if you're doing exercises,
Yeah.
they're amazing. It's just as soon as you get competitive, they move so fast that
It's ridiculous.
It's not like when you go to a tournament legal longsword.
Yeah. But so the thing about the lightness, longsword, well, actually, I'm not 100% sure what, I might be talking out of my ass here because the tournament that you're talking about where everyone got injured might be about to prove me wrong. But the flexibility of the sword is really quite important for any weapon.
Yeah.
And there's a certain point where, like, I feel with longsword, as long as you've just got good protective gear, like we spoke in the last podcast, where it's just like you've got your forearms, you've got your elbows that properly protect your elbows, you properly protect your knees, it's hard to really get injured at this point. And, like, maybe if you really cop one hard in the head.
Gloves.
Oh, and gloves.
Yeah.
The ever ongoing question for finding a good pair of fucking longsword gloves.
Although people are pretty happy with the Gabriels, and I used them last year. That's a 5-fingered hard-plated glove.
Yep.
The Gabriels are decent. They're reasonably lightweight. They're much lighter than the Koning glove, which is
yep.
what I bought in 2017.
17.
Jesus
Fucking
Christ,
hell.
a long time ago. It was before I knew.
Yeah. But like Siggy lights, do they cause injuries much? Like at least in Melbourne, I haven't heard of. Siggy
I haven't heard of a
lights
single injury
fucking
from
people
them.
up.
This is the thing. I mean, what's caused injuries? The Regnier standards caused a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, to be entirely fair to the Regnier standard, that's partly because it's the sword everyone had.
What do you mean?
Like when we were starting HEMA in like 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
Actually, I started in 2015.
15, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was 16, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. That was the sword you bought, was just the Regnier standard.
Yeah, the Reggie. Yep.
100 cm blade, stiff as fuck.
Based.
They
Could cuss your opponent.
They were durable, and also
one good
everyone was
thrust.
fucking convinced that you needed a stiff sword so that you could parry well. Like they hadn't heard of.
God.
Fuck, I think it's in this one.
Jesus Christ. Sorry, what?
Yeah. Hold on. They hadn't heard of. This book has 5 words in it.
Read the fucking book.
Please. The book I'm currently holding is translated by Harry R. And it's Peter von Danzig. You can buy it on Blurb.
Yeah, Blurb, I think.
I think it's on Blurb.
Yeah,
We can leave a
fucking
link.
Harry, this is actually a champion fucking translation.
Yeah,
Like this
it's
one.
really nice. Also, the verse has the verse of the Zettel rhymes because Harry decided he cared that it rhymed, and it's cool.
With the translation.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that he did that.
To pick a
Fucking
random
hell.
pit, he who waits for cuts and follows in this art finds naught but sorrow.
God damn. Good on you, man.
It's really cool. Some of the rhymes are like a little dodge because translating into rhyme is a bitch.
Yeah.
He did very well.
Yeah, you have to be faithful. But yeah.
Yeah, they are. Cool. Voronarch to these two things, the whole art owes its origins. Weak and strong, the word indes, remember hereon. That's okay. That's the 5 words.
What was that? 3 words, 3 rules of fencing. So we've got,
So the 3 rules of fencing are distance, which is Lager and Strata. All of fencing changes at Lager compared to Strata. Indes, you can roughly map to tempo, but you can kind of also map Voronarch to tempo. They don't map directly. It's a different rule system.
It's a different rule, but it's the same.
It's the same
rules.
idea.
Yeah.
And then just strong and weak is
Strong. Yeah.
strong and weak is the same. Anyway, in 2016, this beer is making me burp a lot. In 2016, people thought that you needed a stiff sword to parry because they hadn't learned of using the strong.
Read the fucking book. Did we really think that? Is that?
We didn't think that.
No,
but people
but did
thought
people
that.
really think that?
There are whole long arguments of people being like, have you heard of using the strong half of your sword? Also, if you have good edge alignment, floppy swords don't matter so much because the edge just doesn't wobble.
Well, no.
Which does actually come down to, or it does like circle round to something I was talking about last time, is that the blade geometry needs to be correct for the blades that you're using. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the blade geometry looks like a historical sharp or looks like a historical fetter. What matters is that it performs kind of like those swords, but lets us do it really safely. And so you want the edge to be steady and you want the sword to be really flexible. Flexible means that you can thrust people, and it's like it's going into the person if you really care about imagining
that you're killing
that
somebody.
you're killing someone, which is insane.
I love imagining killing people. That's why I love Fat Bris so much. Because,
Yeah, actually, all the
what it's all
longsword
about.
bros who want to imagine killing people should start doing Rapier, because it's the only one where we're 100% sure that that's what it was for.
yeah, longsword, it's like, is this just like trying to G you up so that, when you fucking go to the army, you can deal with stress properly?
And there's there's a really strong argument that it's just sport.
It's just sport. It's just like, I know how to use a weapon because I'm a martial person, and I also want to be in a sport now.
Like, specifically when I'm saying longsword, I mean the longsword that the HEMA people are doing, which is unarmored one-on-one fighting.
Yeah.
Because I'm fucking aware that longswords existed and that knights had them, but they wore armor.
And also, it's in battles and whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't use swords. Swords are
You go and battle. You're using a fucking poleaxe or
you
a
got
lance.
picks or fucking
you got a
hammers.
hammer. Like, that's well established. We fucking know that, right? Fucking Matt Easton has made a million fucking videos about what fucking knights used.
Yeah.
And yet we're all still trapped on this idea that the sword is for battle.
Well, yeah, it's romantic, man.
I mean, it's cool.
Come on, tell me that you weren't a kid swinging around a stick.
I
and
mean,
be like,
fuck yeah, I was, and I thought it was cool. But
I can chop through plate mail with this. Yeah.
yeah, and you're not an idiot for thinking that, because that's definitely everything that like our media tells us. But also,
But if you do want to recreate the feeling of killing somebody, and that's why you're doing HEMA, use a rapier.
use a rapier. It's in here somewhere.
It's in all of them.
It's in all of them.
It's in literally.
The swords are through cunts, and there's a great plate. I want to find the particular plate because it's just cool.
While you're finding that,
Oh yeah, here it
is
is.
it the one with the dagger as well?
So for those playing along at home, plate 182, so in the Tom Leone translation, that's page 268, is when you shank them so deeply that you can throw them using your sword as a lever.
Yeah. Capo Ferro talks about somewhere in here. He talks about how you shouldn't be killing people because it's like against nature, but also
Sometimes you got to kill
sometimes you got to kill a cunt, and that's why you should do it with a
sword,
With a
because
sword.
sword is the most natural weapon or some shit.
Yeah. Weapons exceeding the proper distance of natural defense and offense are awkward to use.
I love head.
You love head, Woody. That's one of the best head paws I've seen in my life, in fact.
All right, well, the internet's going to be angry at me. The 5 people who are going to listen to this podcast and they're going to think I'm a moron.
I'm going to be like, man, what a rookie paw. It's almost as if you don't do fencing. Anyway, Capo Ferro is talking about fucking guns, right?
Actually, my fencing club is not a drinking club with a fencing problem. It's a fencing club with a drinking problem.
Oh, that hits home for anyway. Anyway, Cap thinks that guns are repugnant to civil society. He also thinks that daggers, which are weapons that are too short, are repugnant to society. Why? Because Rome banned them. Right? Classic. Love it.
Caesar never would have been
Caesar.
They
They had rapiers. Caesar would have been fucking G. Yeah. He talks about fucking the Roman soldier comes home and then they replace their weapons with fucking tunics and become farmers. And now he's like, nowadays, where it's much shitter than Rome, soldiers are a great burden in peacetime.
Yeah.
Since they are not versed in any other occupation besides war, they hate peace. And so, this is why the sword is the most perfect and useful weapon. Talking specifically about rapier here, since it is proportional to the distance from which a fence is normally performed.
I'd love it if there was like a standardized Italian distance that you bite your thumb at a dude. And that's just like actually the fencing distance.
That's the fencing distance, yeah.
It's like just out of reach for a dude to draw and lunge at you. Someone please do a Shakespeare adaptation where all of the insults happen at the range
of that
just
fencing can
outside
begin.
of fencing.
But yeah, no, Cap is all about, like, the rapier is a great weapon. I think they're just, I think these beers love giving head. They're givers. We're not, because I like head as much as everyone else, but these beers love giving.
Keeping the label away from the camera until...
until a sponsorship?
Until they decide to sponsor us.
Yeah, I mean, we literally just picked one of the cheapest beers available.
It's not good.
Yeah, but we are drinking it on camera, so,
Yeah.
It's
completely fine.
It's completely fine. We recommend this beer.
Anonymous beer that I won't tell you what it is. I recommend it for drinking on your podcast.
I actually don't recommend it. It's one of the more average beers that I've had in my life. Oh, good God. Anyway, yeah, he's basically like, if you want to, you can kill people. You should kill people. Go practice rapier. And then, like, also, the thing about the rapier textbooks is that they're like, Fabrus's famous, well, I think it's famous statement of it wouldn't work in the streets. These dudes, it implies the existence of the Sal.
There are multiple times Fabrus says, this works in the Sal, don't do it on the street. So there's the direct reference is he's talking about an appel, which is where you stomp your foot on the Sal floor. And he says, if you're fucking in the square, that's not doing anything. You're just giving away a tempo for no fucking reason.
Yep.
Right?
It implies that
there's a separation between Sal and
the street.
And that there is competitive practice that people are trying to win in the Sal.
In the Sal. Exactly right. Yep.
And that there is a very real application.
Yep. And, like, I mean, fucking Fabrus is commissioned by, the King of Denmark, right?
Christianus. We went over this.
Yeah.
His most serene majesty, the all-powerful Christianus the Fourth.
Oh, it's fucking, it's just... the jokes write themselves, really.
I love juvenile humor. It's the best.
We're in a... I actually don't want to kill anyone.
No.
If that wasn't clear.
I don't need to pretend that I'm killing someone.
And I don't need to pretend that I'm doing that. And it's very cool that the fencing texts acknowledge that, like, what you're learning should be applicable in a real life situation, because it's an admission by the masters, by the writers, that what I'm teaching you is a sport. What I'm teaching you is a fun plaything, and you're going to go and win tournaments, and you're going to go win your Sal fucking thing and get your little medal. But also the lessons that you get from this are
real skills.
Yeah. And, that it's a little bit unlike the kind of McDojo self-defense club where it's like, I'm going to teach you street defense.
There's a little bit of that, though, because that's what Giganti sells. And if you're doing Giganti, you're probably bad at fencing.
Yeah, because Giganti does actually sell that, and it is shit.
It's a bad book.
And he's historically a McDojo too. Like, he has people saying, like, Giganti's fucking plagiarizing Fabrus and other fencing masters.
I'm just going to rag on this for a second. Giganti is like the book that people keep recommending to people who are just starting working with fencing texts.
Yeah. And
and they recommend it because it's short. And I'm just going to show a little visual here because this is perfect.
Yeah, this is great.
Right. So this is the length of, actually it's thinner because none of that's fencing advice. This is the length, so from page 3 to page 33 of Fabrus's advice on fencing.
And everything else.
He outlines fucking everything here. And then this is bonkers good, and you should read it. But this shit is for helping you make sense of the first 30 pages. And it does help you make sense of the first 30 pages, and there's some really cool shit in there. But if you're just looking for entry-level fencing, and that's what people say that Giganti gives you,
it's dog shit.
this cunt is just... He's just shit.
Honestly, well, you've said this to me before. I actually don't know if it is, but it does read to me as a leaflet, like as a pamphlet to advertise this school. It doesn't read really as an actual fencing text. And I mean, if you want to read a good fencing text that's roughly the same size, honestly, I can recommend Cap pretty hard.
Capo Ferro is a little hard to like pull through on your own.
I guess so.
I think Fabrus is actually a little clearer.
I think
Fabrus doesn't like liken things to the Romans and try and do all their justification shit. He just gives you fencing advice the whole time, and also he's actually kind of funny. Capo Ferro is cool. I reckon start attacking Capo Ferro when... Like, I would use some of the videos that we're going to put out as aids for attacking Capo Ferro.
Yeah.
And I would sort of recommend it to someone. Maybe it's their second Rapier book, or even actually maybe it's their third. I would maybe consider getting Vienna and Capo Ferro at the same time.
You do raise a good point. Actually, I've been finding Capo Ferro is really, really, really good to read at the moment.
But you have also been learning Rapier since 2016.
This is fair. And... Yeah, I mean, part of what the videos that we're going to be putting out do is skipping through all of the flowery. That I did actually forget that is a thing. The really cool thing about Fabrus is that it's written in the Enlightenment, that period of time when everything's flowery and scientific and whatever. And Fabrus is like, I don't like that.
He's just like, I'm going to teach you how to fence.
I'm going to teach you how to fence. Boom. And he's so cut and dry, and it's so against all of the writing principles that are of his time.
Well, there's a lot of like potentially really, really good Rapier texts. Like a lot of people really like Marcelli, which is much later. A lot of people really love Marcelli. Marcelli's been so fucking long talking about random shit that isn't fencing.
Just because that's like the style of the writing.
That's just sort of the style, and it sucks. Fabrus is like, there's no style. I'm just going to teach you the fencing. Here's the principles of the fencing. And actually, if Fabrus' style is working for you and you're sort of deep in the source with Fabrus,
Stay on Fabrus.
Read it a few times. Vienna helps you get some detail.
Vienna is,
If you want to get sort of left of field deep in the source, Thibaut. Thibaut's advice is pretty salient. You do want to skip quite a bit of content because he spends a lot of time telling you how to draw circles and justifying like all this bullshit. And you want to basically just skip up to where the fencing happens, at least to start. Skip up to where you can find your first tableau of actual fences and then find what bit of text is referring to that tableau. And that's probably the best way to start attacking Thibaut. I couldn't read it until Mosh was basically showing me sections that were of interest to him.
We've spoken about this not on the podcast. Thibaut reads as a math proof. So like
that's why I'm saying it's like get deep in the source on this sort of before you even start attacking it.
Look at Thibaut, because it's kind of like if the way that you want to learn calculus is by getting people's theses that puts calculus to the test, you're just going to grab a nice research paper and it's like, okay, I'm going to try and find thousands of examples that prove that
calculus works.
I'm going to try and break it. And then here is the proof to show that it works. There we go. We have Tibbo.
Yeah.
And then we've got Fabris. And Fabris is like, okay.
It's like, yo, have you heard of numbers? You can add them up.
Fabris is like, okay, so you got numbers, right? And you want to know other numbers, but you don't know them. They're letters now. Okay, don't worry. You can use letters and numbers. Work it out, bro.
The answer's still 11.
Yeah, and then right at the end, he's got a spear and he's got the sword. And he's like, here's a little problem. You should be able to solve this.
The thing about that problem as well that I think is cool, you probably come back to that problem. I think I've probably come back to that problem 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And had like subtly different solutions. Your first solution is extremely right.
Yeah, that's it. We did solve it collectively ages ago.
Yeah. So you might have some subtle, I reckon I got a good interp on how to do this. You might have some subtle little changes or whatever. But your first interp, when you attack that from having read the whole book, your first interp is going to be right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's fucking amazing about Fabris, because there's a pedagogical system where he lays everything out. Any jargon that he mentions that you feel like hasn't been scaffolded yet will be explained in short order.
Yep. Yep.
And then from then, like once you leave the introduction, you're never running into anything that hasn't been explained. Right? And if you are, he goes, here's a new concept. And then he explains it. And he uses as a framework shit he's already explained. So the proceedings, right? The proceedings are amazing because after book 1, you now understand distance and tempo. And you should have a good grip on strong and weak. But Fabris isn't convinced. So he goes, so there's this sweet thing where we can just walk at the cunt and that'll be good. And we'll have the advantage of tempo because we're going first. But just in case you didn't get all the lessons, the first proceeding is just making all the 3 rules of fencing being distance, timing, strong and weak. Really, really clear, making it really, really easy to get your head around them. And then he goes, all right, boys, you got it.
Yep.
Here's his second rule. It's a bit zany. We're actually just going to lean a bit more heavily on the rule of strong being really powerful.
Yeah.
Right? We're just going to lean a little bit more heavily on that for this rule of proceeding. And then that's pretty cool. And he walks you through that. And then third rule, he basically goes, so that's strong stuff. It's good, hey?
It's good. It's great.
We love it. But it's a little bit hard to turn that high third into a touch, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's like, what the fuck is that? And they don't have a bar of it.
They don't want to play.
No one wants to play. And as soon as they work you out, it's about solving that game.
Yeah. But third proceeding, now you're cooking with gas. Everything's been scaffolded, and now here's a really awesome way to put your strong into play subtly and to use the strong and weak.
Actually, until fucking the last rule, every rule
builds on the last rule.
it builds on the last rule, but like it fucking just mostly relates with strong and weak.
Yeah.
It's like he spends the first book, he's just like, yeah, okay, everyone knows how fencing works. It's tempo and measure, bro. And then he spends fucking 5 rules building up the idea that there's very cool ways that you can work out strong-weak relationships in ways that are quite sort of deceptive.
Yeah.
And even the sixth rule is finally where he puts it all together. He's like, okay, cool. Now you know how to be so deceptive with strong and weak. I've taught you to, step off to the side and understand how stepping off to the side changes that relationship and how their possible responses changes the strong and weak relationship.
Yeah.
He's given you everything. And then on the last one, he's like, cool. So let's stop trying to step off to the side. Let's stop doing zany stuff. Let's just maintain a strong, weak relationship and now play with measure.
Yeah.
And only then, so basically there's, book 1, most of book 2, and only in the very last few pages is he like, okay, here's a thing that has all the 3 rules, but allow me to spend, what is that, roughly 80 pages or more helping you with fucking strong and weak.
Yeah, just in case you didn't get strong and weak.
Just in case you didn't get strong weak, I've given you from page 163 to 219, so 40, 50, 60 pages, if I can do math. Yeah, just under 60 pages of lessons on strong and weak.
Yeah, and the thing is, once you get to 6th rule, guess what you got?
What's that?
You actually have a lesson on Strata.
God damn it.
You actually just have a lesson on Strata. Because what you've got is setting up a position from which you just, all right, we're gonna set up a nice strong weak relationship, and then we're just gonna walk until we're just gonna get close enough.
Yeah.
Until we just fucking win.
Until we could just win. This is what I was finding on Wednesday. So I'm doing the leans. And
took 40 minutes to circle back to Wednesday.
That's just
I've been given decision paralysis.
there's too many things to talk about. Okay, so playing around with all this shit, and then I can lean in really far backwards, and then the cool thing about the Italian lean when you do a find, right? Actually, we got big news that we haven't discussed about on the podcast. So massive tech upgrade. Turns out that Capo Ferro says that you should do gathering steps. Well, he says that he prefers gathering steps almost as a universal kind of thing.
Yeah, let's talk about why in explicit detail, because I think people don't really know. So when you do an advance...
this is the traditional right foot, then left foot, right foot, left foot.
So lead foot, back foot. When you do that kind of advance that is taught in modern fencing, is taught fucking in every HEMA club I've ever seen.
Yep.
And then you drink cheap beer that makes you burp. When you do an advance, when your right foot goes forward, until your back foot is completely settled, you're front weighted. So while your front foot is in the air, you're front weighted. And then once it lands, you're front weighted. And it's not until that back foot is completely done that you're capable of being anything but front weighted, which means you can't retreat.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you do a gathering step, and I just want to make sure that we're clear, a gathering step is not, and now my heels are together, fucking this cunt.
Oh, Marazzo,
And people who do Marazzo have done damage to the idea of the gathering step. A gathering step does not have to be the feet come all the way together.
Does Marazzo actually say that?
I don't know, but
I'm willing to believe that he probably doesn't.
Marazzo is probably a G. So really,
I don't know why I've taken such disdain to anyone that's reading it, but I have been apparently taught.
Let's just make sure that we aim all of our vitriol and blame at HEMAists and not directly at the books for now.
For now, yeah.
You can aim your vitriol at Silver. Silverists are used to it.
So yeah, and you can you can genuinely aim vitriol at Giganti, and historically you have like credence to do so because everyone else did that too.
Yeah, and it's always okay. I don't know if I can finish that joke. It's just
it's okay.
Made me sad.
Yeah, the joke has been finished for.
You know
the
what?
people
I'm
that
looking
know.
through the Montante cards.
Yeah,
put on air, I suppose.
and you don't see a single gathered.
Not a single gathered position. I'm sure there is one.
Look, because when it says gather your feet together, I mean obviously you assume gather your feet together, but and then so it's like gather your feet together, step out. You're like, oh well, I'm human, so I'm going to assume that means literally put them together.
After a cursory glance, I can't find any. Continue.
Gather steps. I mean, like I can't help but feel that.
Is it a funny
It
translation?
must be a funny translation thing.
I don't speak Italian.
I have to be. I'm convinced that that's what's going on, because if the translation literally said "put your feet heel to heel,"
Then it would probably say put your feet heel to heel.
yeah,
You know, a book that tells you to do that. Tibbo.
Tibbo says heel to heel.
Well, he shows you heel to heel because he's upright, right? But then when in all of his actual fencing, he's not really that heel to heel. He just starts there. Anyway, the gather step in Capo Ferro is not go from a wide stance directly huge step into a heel to heel position. It's just get those feet closer together.
He also explicitly says that he doesn't like narrow stances where your feet are close together, as in almost touching.
All right, so if you're gathering your feet and you're not meant to do that, maybe it's not one of the times Capo Ferro contradicts himself. Maybe it's just, okay, we've got a really wide stance because we want to get our front foot as far into distance as possible before we transfer our weight there.
Yeah.
And now we're just going to get our back foot a bit closer. And what happened on Wednesday,
It was wild, fucking wild.
which is just when we have training, as we train on Wednesdays.
It should become a mysterious day in the viewer's mind. What happened on Wednesday?
What happened on Wednesday? So what happened on Wednesday was that we were playing with just gathering. Everyone at training was gathering because Bibi went on a 20-minute
Massive
rant.
tirade.
Yeah.
I think overall, everyone fucking loved it, seemed to be the reception.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, Mosh kept on adding petrol to my... Anyway.
Yeah, the huge petrol can, pouring it on the fire. So the thing that happened was that when we wanted to get closer and we would gather instead of doing an advance, we were able to stay relatively rear weighted. Now, so it's fair to say, and Gizliero talks about this, so when you lift a foot, the planted foot is the weighted foot. It's actually where all of your weight is, even if your weight is also falling in space. Right? So when you gather, and by bringing the back foot up, you are becoming intermittently front weighted. But it's actually only for one tempo. Mm-hmm. Because actually really only as the foot rises.
Yeah.
When the foot lands,
And so,
you're weighted.
I want to touch on something that you said just before.
Yeah.
Which is that the problem, and we were experimenting with this as well, the problem with doing the right foot, left foot advance is that when you lift your right foot and then it goes down, you haven't gained measure if you are completely on your back foot because the weight is still there.
Yeah.
And then if you want to try and hang on, is this going to make sense? So the reason that you're going to do an advance, let's start here.
Sure.
The reason that you want to advance towards somebody is so that you can get closer to hitting them, right?
Yeah.
So the reason that we're going right foot, left foot is so that we don't end up with all of our weight on our front foot when we're trying to walk in,
Yeah.
so that we can stay safe. So if we lift our right foot and we put our right foot down and all of the weight is on the left foot, we haven't gained any measure yet.
No.
And then if we're trying to then transfer our weight to the right foot, we have an enormous amount of fucking space that we need to lean through. And I suspect is also why we constantly end up in this upright position.
Yeah.
Because like you said right at the beginning of the podcast, you're trying to get to your front foot, but halfway through you're like, I'm going to die now. Because you can't escape because your back foot is like you've already got this quite extreme extended stance.
Yeah, so I'm just going to cut you off there. One of the things that happens when you're in a really wide stance, if you actually commit to being leant forward, and it doesn't mean that you transfer your weight. So if you still sort of like have most of your weight near your butt, it just becomes easier to move your back foot if you're actually leant. And so this is one of the things we were experiencing on Wednesday. So every time you actually got the lean, now doing those little gathering steps, you weren't over your front foot in a way that was like, I can only flesh from here.
Yeah.
You could very readily lunge from that position and the front foot would free.
Yeah.
But it was, if you actually got your lean on, it was easier to move your back foot. And so you could then reduce how wide that stance was and you'd be gaining measure.
Yep.
And that was what was really, really, really cool.
The other thing that we were doing is that the gather step, we would begin it just before we entered measure. And so rather than stepping into measure with your right foot, where you actually haven't stepped into measure yet and now you need to lean, and then like you say, like you can't lift your back foot until you're entirely front weighted. So if you've stepped into measure, right, with your right foot doing the classic right-left step, then to move your left foot closer so that you can actually hit stretta now, you have to fully be in a fucking lager position with no retreat, possibly even stretta position, right? If your front foot went too far forward.
Yeah.
And you just can't escape. And so what we were doing is the gather step, you basically, just before you enter measure, you just move your left foot to where it was going to, like basically to be in range.
Yeah.
And now you're completely rear weighted.
You've got potential extension.
You've got potential extension to fucking lager.
Yeah.
To like the touch. But you're not in range yet at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's such a strong tool that if you've got a sword advantage, and this is what I experienced with you, is that because your measure is much longer than me, because you're like a foot taller than me?
I'm not a foot.
I don't know.
I'm 6'4". Habibi's 5'9".
No, I don't know how fucking...
like less than half a foot.
I don't know. Anyway, you seem like your range is a little foot longer than mine.
Sure.
It's insane. But I had a sword advantage, and every time I've tried to go right, left, and advance off that, you wrecked me. And I'm pretty sure there's video footage that I can show of that happening.
Yep.
Whereas on Wednesday, I went left foot first, and then you took the tempo of me moving my left foot to do some shit. And in one of the passes, it like wasn't enough to free your sword, and I was able to chase that to an advantage.
Yeah.
And get a touch. Anyway, the end. I think it's very cool. Gathering steps based.
One of the things that happens when you move your right foot forward first is that you inherently change, like unless you try not to, you inherently change the blade interaction. When you move your back foot first, you don't inherently change the blade engagement because you're just closing your base up behind you. You're not moving your whole base forward. Right? And that's what was happening. So
Yeah.
you weren't disrupting your blade position, And it's the foot and the blade movement at the same time as a tempo that really fucks up your position. That's really easy to capitalize on.
Foot and blade, yeah. And
If
especially
you
with
just
that,
get a blade action, you can move, but you can't just blast a lunge down that unless your opponent's away with the fairies, which, to be entirely fair, that's very common.
I'm pretty sure you actually got me in that same bout with me going away with the fairies.
Yeah, very common.
Very, very common.
But when you move the back foot to close up distance instead of moving the front foot to close up distance, because you're not changing the blade relationship, but it's still a tempo, it makes it easier to capitalize on the tempos that your opponent gives you. And that was one of the big things.
Oh, fuck. Right. So when you move, the other thing that was going on was that you move your back foot and then you lean and you seek the sword, right? And sometimes you do that with a right foot moving out as well. So the finding of the sword, the lean, and the foot are all happening as one cohesive unit.
Yeah.
And it's now one tempo, but your weight is established. Then you have time. So you move your back foot, you then move the front foot and you find, right? They respond to the find, but you're already in lager. So let's say they try and retreat, right? And you've sort of moved yourself into like a lager threatening strata position. They try to like re-find your sword. You can strengthen your sword and gather again. And now you're in strata, right? But you've moved your foot, then you find, and they have to respond. So their response, you get to respond now, right? Everything's nice and in tempo, happening as the books say they should happen. When you move your right foot first, you do all of the lean and everything off the gate.
Yeah.
And so when they respond, your only response, if they retreat, for example, is to gather your feet base back to out of measure.
Yeah.
So you're never actually gaining an advantage. You never get ahead on tempo because your back foot is too far behind.
Well, so this
to
was
capitalize on shit.
To extend on that as well, actually. So this is one of the things that was happening for me on Wednesday was if I was gaining the measure, I was gaining the sword, I was improving my position, and then something I wasn't expecting came through. I just retreated to, like, I just moved my rear foot back. So I just expanded my own stance.
Yeah.
And then you got more access to your own return attack.
Yeah.
Because the
redouble makes sense all of a sudden. And
yeah, you're prepared to turn the attack back on. You've actually got a few retreats in the tank, depending on how close your feet were. And yeah, when you move both feet back, you lose that. And it's really, really common. I see this a lot. This is like a huge beginner mistake. And you might think that you're an advanced fencer, but if you do this, it's still a beginner mistake. Is to consistently retreat out of distance without using that to build any advantage of the fencing.
Yeah. Yep.
Like sometimes you just have to fucking bail. Like I'm not questioning that sometimes that's okay. But anytime you're bailing, like anytime you're on the retreat, you should be looking at how do I improve my position here so I can start to return the attack. And sometimes something catches you by surprise. You should give it a bit of space. Sure, right? Sometimes this position's fucked and I just need to start again. But you should be looking for... Usually this will happen on the tempo of the retreat as you expand the distance. you're going to see, because you're giving yourself more time, right? You're sort of adding a tempo that your opponent needs to cross. So as you add that tempo, you can look at the situation. Cool. If I lean over to my left, does that shoot them across my forte? Yeah, it does. And so as you make the retreat, you bring yourself really over your left foot, you lean over your left foot, so now their attack follows through over that line, and now you have a sweet counterattack in second.
Yeah, yep.
Right? And so you spring forward and you drive that counterattack home.
I'm having flashbacks to Wednesday.
You should be looking at those sort of ways to re-enter when you're on the back foot. And if you're bringing both feet away, you're making that harder because you're emotionally detaching yourself from that fencing engagement.
Yep. Oh, well, and so like to clarify by both feet away. Well, okay, so this is the thing is that.
Which is not to say that it's an error to move both feet away.
No. But it's the problem with the right-left thing is that it extends your stance so much that you actually don't have in your tank anymore, like really anything but, because let's say you have quite an extended stance already, and then somebody attacks you and you move your back foot back. Only so much in the tank that you can move that back. So then your right foot comes back like massively, and that tempo is always so short that you really have no other option but just to completely bail distance. Yeah. Whereas when your feet are just kind of a natural stance apart,
a sword length
apart. Rough sword, yeah, or even less, honestly. I mean, it's kind of like the way that Cap has it, it's basically like your hand, it's not that much more than just a natural gate apart. You have heaps of room to fucking step back.
Yeah.
And so that like panic, that first panic step that you make gets you enough out of measure that you're still a tasty little treat to your opponent.
Yeah.
But
that's the
you
other
have
thing,
heaps of time to fucking react to whatever they're going to do. So you can bail and you're like, oh, fuck. And then you watch for like a second as they lunge themselves in some stupid position and you just have their sword found. And you're like, oh, I can capitalize off that. Fine.
Yeah. So this is the other thing as well. It's like if you bail distance really hard, if you create enough gap, you've completely reset the fencing, which you might want.
Yeah.
You might want that.
I mean, if you're a better fencer, I think it's probably going to always be in your favor.
To just reset.
Just reset because you'll get a better advantage over.
Yeah, the likelihood that you have a better situation increases. But if you can get the measure just right, and this is for when you're a much better fencer, not necessarily comparative, but just like this is hard. If you can get the measure just right, you remain a tasty morsel for your opponent. So they keep offending.
Yeah.
And Fabris talks about this. Fabris says this I think it's in his chapter on measures.
Yeah, he said that, yep.
Be very, very, very careful of the retreating fencer.
You know who else says that?
This boy?
Yeah, I'm looking for I'm not going to be able to find it. I'll put it up on the screen.
I'll be able to find it in Fabris much faster because I think it's in chapter 5. I think I read it for the audio book. It's specifically chapter 5, which is the explanation of the two measures. And he says, if the opponent keeps breaking measure as you try to gain it, never get impatient and follow him. Actually, this is where you have to be careful because there are many who feign retreat with the precise intent of enticing the opponent to follow and wound him in the tempo thus created. Instead, remain calm and maintain your form. This will actually give the opponent a sense of false security, which will cause him to come forward. As he does so, he can be wounded in that tempo and will not be able to save himself. Fabric's advice is always so fucking
it's
good.
so clear. It's so good. So good.
So this is actually, let's talk about this. Don't try and read any of these books cover to cover in one go.
Yeah.
If you read a sentence and it makes you go, huh? If it's just like, huh, I hadn't thought about it that way. Stop reading.
You reckon?
Yeah.
And then just start thinking.
Start cooking.
Yeah.
Maybe grab your sword. Maybe grab your friend. Or just like...
Fucking start writing.
Yeah, write your own thoughts about it. Writing your own thoughts about it is fucking so helpful.
I got so many books. I mean, we've been doing this a long time now, I guess, but
Yeah,
many books where I've just got like fucking random notes about fencing.
I have fencing notebooks, cover to cover, handwritten notes that are just from like...
Vienna Anonymous, cover to cover.
Yeah, that's what Vienna
Some
Anonymous
cunt
is
fucking-
basically,
yeah.
right? He's been reading Cap and Fabris.
Well, actually, so when you were like, start with Fabris and then go to Vienna Anonymous, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
Because, like, unless you've been writing notes yourself when
might
you've been
not
reading,
land so well.
it doesn't land.
Yeah.
The thing that I connect with so much about Vienna Anonymous, and I'm sure other people do, but like,
As you relate to writing the
is that I
notes.
relate to, and I'm pretty sure somewhere in my notes I've written identical things to
Yeah.
Vienna Anonymous.
Yeah,
and
there's some shit about the head lane.
yeah.
And in 2020, I was telling Mosh about the head lane, and then I went home and wrote about it.
Yeah.
Like, you just like look down your sword.
Look down your sword.
And sometimes you just have a look, and then you come back up.
And you come back up. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, motherfucker,
yeah,
he like copies out sections of whoever, maybe it's Cap, maybe it's Fab. And then there's just like paragraphs of his ideas and notes off that paragraph. And it's like he's maybe gone to a class. He's like, oh, okay, well, there's that bit of the book. And then he's written notes about it, or they've written notes about it. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. So if you get to a bit and it makes you go, huh, I hadn't thought about that. Or maybe it's like, wow, maybe it leaves your head ringing like a gong. Or maybe you disagree. If you're like, nah, Fabris, get fucked. It's time
Nah.
to stop reading and it's time to start writing.
yeah.
Get into why you think Fabris should get fucked. Really get into it. You're going to find out that Fabris was right all along eventually. But it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you're wrong. What matters is that you think about the
think about
fencing
it.
and that, like, you can't learn fencing from a book, but you can think about fencing. And the point of reading these fencing books is to help you think about your fencing, help you visualize what's happening at training, help you make sense of what's happening at training. And then you can turn that into better and better fencing.
A big part of our strength as a duo has been we read the books, except you. You can't read. I read the books.
To me.
To you. And then we draw on the resources of our entire fucking life
Yeah.
to understand and analyze what the fuck is going on with fencing.
Yeah.
And like there's basically, you know, the violin fucking carpentry, there's fucking actual just fencing, there's social interactions. We bring everything.
Yeah. The innumerable hours fucking around in your backyard playing with sticks.
Yeah. We bring everything in to like work out sort of what's going on with it.
Yeah.
And reading the books is great, and you should read the books because it gives you lots of information. But you have to start, every time we've had a little nugget, we bring it to each other, bring it to your friend, and talk about it and ask them, like, we ask each other constantly, you know, where well, we actually don't ask each other. We just kind of do. I've got this life thing that happened to me that is like this situation.
Yeah.
And it like, you have to tie in everything that you can
All
into
your
the
knowledge
idea.
is knowledge that you have.
Yeah.
Use it all. And also, like,
And it does become applicable, like really applicable to your fencing. It becomes so embodied and so alive.
that's the thing. And you like the thing with talking about it is like, talk to people who you can shorthand with. That's helpful for just getting the idea out of your fucking brain. But also, like, you know, talk to your partner who doesn't give a fuck about fencing and wishes you would shut up. Because actually, they like talking to you.
Yeah.
And, you know, like give your dad a ring.
Let dad know.
Yeah, let dad know. So, Dad, I figured out the strong and weak. Because when you talk to people who don't really know about fencing, but who will listen to you, what you're doing is you're creating a situation where you have to give them a bit of extra context.
Yeah.
And when you have to give that bit of extra context, it sits that piece of information that's buzzing around in your brain into its context, and it starts. Because you've had to give that context now,
It really solidifies it.
solidifies itself.
And like, you have to know what the context is. And also, like, don't be put off if you can't simplify it, because it just like, I mean, I've had this experience of just like, oh, fuck, I actually don't know what the context of this is. And
You're probably not a practiced teacher when you're going through this process.
yeah, but well, you might be, but it might be a super new idea. Like I've had, I don't know if you've had this, but you're like, I've got this fresh new shit that I'm cooking up, right? And you explain it to your friends and they're like, oh, that's amazing. And you try to explain it to somebody and it's like a 7th level meme.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to go through like 9 years of internet history to fucking get it across. And so as you start trying to backpedal and find the context as to where, how can I tell you, simple human who has literally no interest and can't wait for this conversation to end, how do I get this out to you as fast as possible so I can let you off the hook? And for me, it's kind of like, it's like, oh, well, that idea is just this one rule of fencing.
Yeah.
It's like, here I am thinking that there's this like really deep fucking cooked idea.
Yeah.
It's really baked into fencing. And it's like, oh no, this is actually just like,
It's actually just an application of the strong of the sword.
yeah, like this is just tempo and you experience this in your everyday life. Cool. I feel a little shitter now because I feel like I've rediscovered light.
You have reinvented the wheel.
I have reinvented the wheel and I feel like a champion.
The thing is, that's the thing. So the thing is, like, that process, you take that little nugget and you run with it. And like sometimes you just fucking run with a nugget for a week.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That process, for one thing, it's fucking rewarding. It also actually doesn't matter if it's frustrating. Like, it's often quite good if it's frustrating. I remember, because like, so sometimes it's frustrating because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And you think you do.
Yeah.
And I remember so many times sitting at a pub with you and you're telling all the boys, guys, I've got this sweet take. And they're all sitting there like, Bibs, shut the fuck up. Because they don't get it. And they don't get it because you don't get it.
Yeah.
And there's so many times when you've tried to tell me a take and I go, Bibs, this is wrong. And it is wrong. And it's wrong because you don't understand it. And that hitting that opposition is helpful. Like, it's really helpful because then you keep cooking because you've still read that thing and you still had that idea and you still had that moment, that emotional interaction with the text. And you know that there's something there and you've hit all this opposition. So at the very least, you don't know how to deliver that information. And at at a potential, you don't quite understand all the aspects of the information. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you get it all and you don't know how to deliver that information. And sure, you're not a teacher, but if you don't understand how to deliver the information, you probably don't know how to embody the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you don't know how to practice it. And this is one of the things that's really important is anything that you can start, like, you don't need to be the teacher at your club, but if you can show someone something and teach an idea, like just deliver an idea that was like, okay, Fabra says don't chase someone. Cool. Try chasing someone. See what the fuck happens.
Yeah.
Right? And explain to someone that all those tempos are there and then like watch them fucking light you up because they will. Think about how many fucking hits in foil are counterattacks. This is a niche.
So fucking niche.
A lot of hits in foil, a lot of hits in foil, not points, hits, are counterattacks on the retreat.
Yeah, right.
Like a lot of them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Because if you get a clean counterattack, you score.
Gotcha.
Right? But when someone's just chasing you, it's actually reasonably easy to hit them. Just that under the foil rules, they have
Lockout.
They've got the right of way. But
you do raise extremely valuable thing that I sort of can tend to gloss over is that just because you meet a lot of resistance actually doesn't mean that what you're cooking on is of no worth or of no value or whatever. It's just, that you haven't fucking delivered it out properly.
Yeah.
And something that I can think of quite recently, the old bend the wrist. So I read in Fabris so long ago that to find the sword, it's a matter of bending the wrist. And I'm like, Woody! Read the fucking book! And you're like...
I've been given decision paralysis.
And it was just, I couldn't justify it. I couldn't fucking... And you were like, but look, bending your wrist is fucking shit. And I was like, I know it is, but it's there. And I couldn't... And the answer to it, funnily enough, was that everything needed to improve. The fact, like, the postures were wrong, the way that the engagements were even fucking beginning was wrong. The distance was wrong.
We weren't finding the sword.
We weren't finding the sword. We were way too fucking close or far away. Like, there was no understanding of strong and weak. There were so many elements that were wrong. Yeah. And then it was like earlier this year.
Yeah, Nelson ran a really cool event. Melbourne Mesa Club ran a really cool event called Fabris Fest that I had the pleasure of teaching at.
Yeah.
And
I'm pretty sure it was during that fucking seminar.
Well, during that seminar, so I'd actually taught this in New Zealand when I went to Kiwi Fight Camp, which is an amazing event, which I think has settled its dates. So you should.
Oh, really?
Should be starting to see stuff about Kiwi Fight Camp soon. It is the best fencing camp in the Southern Hemisphere. It's fucking amazing.
Ah, fuck. It'd be very cool to see you there.
They run a really good event. It's a very lovely crowd. The New Zealand crowd is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually teaching this bending at the wrist to find the sword thing there.
Yeah, right.
And then I had it like a week to cook on it before the Fabris Fest. And then I was teaching. The sword is found if they pass through your strong.
Yeah.
That's all Fabris says. It's such a fucking... It's such a small phrase. It's the whole bit.
It's the whole bit. It is the rule.
That's the rule. That is the rule of the strong, right? If you've found their sword, they need a whole tempo to free their sword before they can hit you. If they just attack you, you're going to win.
Because you can either parry, which is the worst outcome.
And there is just straight up counterattack.
Or you can, but this is the thing, you can just parry the worst outcome. And there is no, you could be fighting fucking Goliath. And if your strong is over there weak, you can
They're not
parry it.
blowing through that parry.
They can't blow through it.
Yeah.
So at worst, you are always safe.
In the worst case scenario for you, where you're in complete obedience, you're at least safe.
But the reality is that you just extend and you hit them for free.
Yeah. You don't even chase their sword. You just fucking hit them.
You just extend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can do a little wrist bend.
And you can bend your wrist because you're just
putting your strong there.
Yeah, and you had said that to me literally 8 years ago.
Fucking hell.
And I was like, having a bent wrist is shit. And at the time, it was, because it was not yielding results, because it wasn't tied, because none of the fencing was really tied to the rules of fencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the thing. This is like, so let's drill back to the point, which is that when that moment, like when you're reading and you have that like, aha, isn't that interesting? Share it with people. Don't get disheartened if they don't fucking get it. You might not get it. The person you shared it with might be the person who gets it before you. Mm-hmm. Right? But every time you have those little moments where you're like, wow, that's interesting to me. Do stop.
Yeah.
Actually fucking chew on it.
Stop. Allow the information in. Process it. Talk about it. Dream about it.
Yeah. Have a fucking sleep on it. Like, let that seep in. Mm-hmm. And then come back to the book. Mm-hmm. You've got your whole life to master fencing. Doesn't have to happen this week. So, like, read the fucking thing slow as fuck. It doesn't matter. But you just sort of like start chipping away at it. And like, Fabris is dense as fuck. So if you read, especially in the intro is brutal if you do it this way. If you're like, all right, this is general discourse on the guards. The first sentence is just an intro sentence. There's no fencing there. The second sentence is just to tell you how to read through the book. There's no fencing there. Right? Okay. Finally, we're at the third paragraph. And now we've got some fencing. And so it, like, you might rip through it. I've picked a bad example chapter. But okay.
The thing is that when I first got Fabris, I fucking blitzed through that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand shit. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever that there's somebody from the 1600s who talks like a normal
human being. Also, actually, that's
normal fucking bloke.
In no small part, that's thanks to Tom Leone's translation. The Johnson translation, which is the one that's free on Wiktor now, is still pretty good. He still speaks like a normal fucking bloke. That's definitely Fabris, but it's harder to read.
No. I absolutely, yeah. And credit to Tom Leone, does a great job in turning fucking Italian into Renaissance Italian into modern English. It reads like someone, but the character of Fabris, even in the Johnson translation, is actually still there. He's not fucking around saying, like, Cap, it's great in nature.
You're not telling you about how sweet the Romans were.
The Romans wearing their fucking togas and putting down their arms and,
How sick it is that the Roman soldiers were also farmers. Yeah. Like, who cares?
Fucking cares, bro.
Doesn't help me fence.
Ripped through it. I didn't really fucking understand anything. And then nowadays, I'll kind of pick a bit and I rip through it. Well, actually, anytime I go to read Fabris and I do a rip through session, I'll always get to sort of the first couple of plates where there's pictures and my brain is cooked and I realized I've forgotten everything.
Yeah.
All of the aha moments, everything is gone. I'm just too cooked because there was too much good stuff in there.
But there is some value in, at least chapter to chapter, having a little bit of a rip through, which is just so that you're kind of so that your eyes have seen it.
Well, yeah, the last time I did a rip through, I stopped trying to pay attention to real detail and just look at it as like a bit more of a overall lesson.
Yeah, so you can read it that way, but if you're reading it that way, you sort of need to also read it in this sort of slower, absorb the lessons kind of way.
Yeah.
And so if you read a bit where you're like, I've never thought about that in my fencing, it's time to fucking stop reading.
It is time to stop reading.
And if you have a moment where you're like, I disagree, Fabris, read on to see if you suddenly agree. If you don't suddenly agree, write about or talk to someone about why you don't agree with them.
Yeah.
You know, like anytime you're having a strong reaction to the text, either fuck yeah, this is the best shit ever, or what the fuck, which doesn't really happen to be fun. To be fair, you just might not understand.
Might happen to your coach, but
you're not a Noah.
Don't be a Noah, folks. Don't be a Noah.
Yeah, I think that's like my experience with these books, the three that we have on the table, is that every time that I get closer to them, I get better at fencing.
Yeah.
Like every single time. Every single time I understand them more directly, I'm better at fencing.
Yeah.
And it's not like I have to cook on it and then I get better at fencing. I'm just better at fencing.
Yeah.
Because I understand fencing better.
Yeah. I mean, I read Cap and then immediately got better at fencing.
Immediately.
It
was like that day. There's the video that we'll put out might already be out by the time people can see this.
Yeah.
Habibi reads Capo Ferro.
That day.
And then that day goes to training, better at fencing.
No, it was a week. I had 1 week to cook.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, took me a week of reading. Also, the closer I get to Giganti, I don't get better, but I do get warmer. Yeah, because I've got this nice little fire pit and I'm just putting chunks of Giganti. Just keeping me warm on a cold winter's night, you know.
Oh, it's so tragic. Such a shit fucking sauce. I'm gonna read some Giganti. Let's select a choice bit. All right. Okay. No, I'm gonna defend Giganti immediately.
Yeah, do it.
How to advance and retreat in Italian Rapier. Wait, hold on. This might be Tom Leone's bit. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you need to tackle Giganti. So Tom advocates the sweet gathering step.
Does he?
Tom's section in Giganti on how to do Italian fencing, it's like...
Is it more nuanced? Is it better?
I have problems with his interpretation of how to do Italian fencing, but it's not bad. Like this little intro section that he gives you is not... It's not a bad
does
start.
Does he still fence? Nah, or not really?
I don't think so. I think he hunts endangered animals.
Jesus Christ. I really don't condone that, Tom. Fucking hell. Please go back to fucking doing the Lord's work.
Just keep translating Italian fencing texts, please.
God.
Okay, so this is unbearably irritating to me. Giganti says, all right. Hold on, let me find. First of all, it's a fucking word salad. You can't truly say that you understand defense and offense if you only know how to stand in guard or in counter guard, nor if you only know how to deliver a thrust, an imbricata, a mandritto or reverso, nor if you're also good at turning your hand, bearing your body, or maintaining the advantage over the opponent's blade. Yes, Rose, I'm looking at you. You can only make that claim if you have a command of tempo and measure. So,
okay,
Giganti, pretty base. He's doing a good job at dismissing my rage.
Yeah.
Without the knowledge of these two concepts, you may parry or deliver an attack, but without really knowing how to do so, because in both parrying and delivering an attack, it is possible to make several mistakes and get into danger. So far, I'm not mad. Here's where I get mad. Tempo is recognized in the following ways. Suppose your opponent is in guard, stand in the guard out of measure, gain his sword, and observe what he does next. If he performs a cavazione, you can attack him while he does so, and this is a tempo. First of all, you can't fucking attack him. If he doesn't move his feet, if he just does a fucking cavazione and he doesn't move his feet and you attack him, you're going to die.
Yeah. They can literally just retreat back. In fact,
their tempo just finishes before yours and they win.
a prudent opponent would act as follows. Hang on, wait. Oop. Well, he would feint a cavazione while keeping his body somewhat back. Then when you come forward to attack, they parry and then chop your face. Thanks, Cap.
If he delivers an attack and you parry and counterattack in a single tempo, this too is a tempo. Who's this helping? This is my problem with a lot of this stuff. It's like, yes, so if he delivers an attack, this is a tempo. If he changes guards while he does so, is a tempo. Like, yeah, these are tempo. But,
Well,
like,
look, I mean, it's his fucking...
this is the fucking that's a paddling meme.
Oh, that's a paddler. It's the fucking...
All these
pamphlet to
actions
join-
are tempi because they contain various intervals of time. While the opponent executes one of these motions, he must necessarily receive your hit because since he is moving, he cannot strike you at the same time. So this really comes back to what I was saying with about the cavazione. It's like, if your opponent is still capable of retreating, yes, there's a tempo, but your tempo is only allowed to be as long as theirs.
Yeah.
So if they lift their foot and land their foot, beauty bonza, you're on the money. You can probably go, right? Mm-hmm. And any foot that comes up has to land. So you've got 2 tempo in the tank. Go. If they just move their sword, unless their movement of the sword is to put it in Narnia, if they just do a little disengage or they just turn their hand to fourth, your motion can only be as long as that motion. Now, the cool thing is you can look at those motions and you can measure them. Mm-hmm. And this obviously won't work while you're fencing, but you start to get an idea of it and start to map it. If someone does a disengage, grab a piece of string.
About that long.
Right, it's about that long. Or is that camera still working? It's fucked.
I have no idea.
Right. So it's, let's say 3-4 inches long to do that little horseshoe shape. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to put that much of your sword forward.
Yeah.
If there's no step.
Yeah.
If there's a step, by all means, fucking stab a cunt. Get him.
Yeah.
But if there's no step, you can move your sword forward the exact length of the cavazione.
And then you've basically got a completely winning position from there.
Yeah, and you may well find that now you're actually in strata with their sword found, in which point you may attack them with impunity. But you can't just attack into the disengage.
No. If you attack into the disengage, you're going to fucking die.
You're going to eat shit. It's going to suck.
Yeah.